Welcome to this wild hog adventure with the Wild Hogs in Beaver, Utah. Our adventure on this trip was based at the KOA campground located in Beaver. Here you can see three of the piglets that are in training: Shane, Scott, and Shane's buddy Dexter. This is a razor riding adventure, so let's get started. This portion of the video kind of gives you an idea of the terrain that we experienced, which included a lot of rocks and downed trees. The burned up trees that we drive through are the result of a lightning strike back in 2019. This is the time of year Utah experiences its monsoon season, which results in afternoon rain dumps that are causing all the muddy roads out here. Scott wasn't satisfied with just going out four-wheeling. He wanted to try his hand at three-wheeling too. And a mighty fine job he did. At one point along the trail, Dexter wanted to provide some training to Shane and Scott on how to handle his dirt bike so they could give it a try. Let's watch while Dexter demonstrates how to dismount from the motorcycle. Let's watch that again from the ground level. Pay attention. Thank you very much for that demo, Dexter. You're such a pro. Very good at what you do. As we traveled the dirt roads back here, we were able to come across a very nice picnic area. It also had a nice overview of the town of Beaver down below. While we were eating lunch, Shane observed a Russian spy satellite over us and was able to capture an image the satellite had taken of us. Once we had reached flatter ground, Dexter was brave enough to turn over his motorcycle to Shane and Scott and allow them to see what they could do. Fortunately, they rode a lot better than Dexter did, and neither one of them practiced the dismount technique that Dexter had taught them. While the boys were practicing their motorcycle riding, our naturalist, Dr. D, was busy looking for daisies to pick. All he could find was a nice mushroom. So he was able to give us a little bit of history about mushrooms. Isn't that special? Once we got to the top of Bald Mountain, which peaks out at a little over 10,000 feet, we had a beautiful vista view of the valley below. This was a perfect place to take a picture of the motley crew of wild hog adventurers. As you saw earlier, the monsoonal rains are doing a great job of keeping the greenery green up here in the mountains, but it's also creating some real havoc in the lower laying areas. As you can see here, it washed a bunch of debris down across the main road. This required us to find a safe place where we could cross this without getting ourselves stuck in the middle of all the debris. We were only a short distance from our exit onto the paved road when we ran across this, and it would have been at least a 2-hour drive back the way we came if we had failed to find a place where we could safely cross this. I'm sure by now many of you are wondering what exactly was going on at camp. Well, I guess we could tell you a little bit about that. But for the most part, what happens on a wild hog adventure stays with the wild hogs. We'll see what we can tell you. Back at camp one evening, Scotty had managed to get a boo-boo on his left big toe. It had something to do with Shane's fire water that he had brought along with him for camp. Scott may have had a little too much of it before he jumped onto Dexter's battery-powered scooter for a ride to the bathroom. So the following morning, Scott put out the call for a doctor to assist him in mending his wound. And Dr. D, who looked like he had just gotten up from an all-night bender, he was right there, ready to assist. And when the doctor heard that surgery or stitches might be involved, he was even more eager to get started. At this point, Scotty was really wishing that Dr. G instead of Dr. D was around and was contemplating other alternatives. Jim, being the helpful wild hog that he is, suggested maybe he'd like to call for the AirMed helicopter. Scott could then have a pleasant scenic ride down to the hospital in St. George at $10,000 plus. Scott's response to that idea was, "Helicopter this." So Dr. D agreed to take a look at the wound on the foot and said it looked somewhat gnarly, could require some major tools. After examining the toolkit, the doctor suggested that Scotty suck it up and just put on a Band-Aid. The doctor's prognosis was that major infection and gangrene probably wouldn't set up until Scott was at home. Some of the other activities at the park included swimming and disc golf. The 3 swimmers pictured here violated the rules of the park and climbed over the locked fence. I can only tell you that these 3 got yelled at by the old lady at the check-in desk. She told them that was a good way to get kicked out of the park, but I'm sure she was more concerned about these wild hogs getting their meaty balls fried by the lightning that was coming in over the mountains. After the day's activities and a good meal, it was usually time for a good game of Oh Hell. A good round of Oh Hell would usually make you kind of thirsty, so we'd have to stop, take a break, maybe have a little of Shane's fire water. After quenching the thirst, it was back to the cards. And of course, after having that water, the next game was typically a little slower because people were thinking a little slower. But of course, we figured at the end of that game, maybe a little more water might help. Although, as you can see from the next pick, it doesn't necessarily help everybody. One morning, Dr. D had to help Shane put his shoes on because he just couldn't get it together and he looked like hell. But that didn't matter. In the end, we all had a heck of a great time. And if you'd like to plan your own wild hog adventure, contact the Wild Hog Adventure Center in Utah anytime. You can make your own itinerary, or we can come up with a custom itinerary just for you. We do recommend that you make sure your health insurance is current if you do decide to go on a wild hog adventure. The only way that you can find out what really happens on these adventures is to go on one yourself. Until next time, hasta la vista, baby. I'll be back.